Wow, you know what? The last video about Shin Kamen Rider actually did really well. And it got so many views and so many likes, and look at these numbers! How do I get more numbers? I want bigger numbers this time. Maybe I should make more videos on Kamen Rider? Or maybe I should play games on Kamen Rider, because that way maybe more people would be interested in that. I never quite understood the appeal behind indie games, because I feel like people have always told me that indie games are usually way better than AAA games and what all the major publishers are working on. But to me they just felt like inferior versions. Sure, some of them have some interesting elements and there is some sort of an aesthetic to it, but for the most part I didn't quite understand what was so special about them. But I feel like now I understand that was because I grew up playing racing games more than anything else. I didn't really grow up playing 2D side-scrollers or platformers or stuff like that. I grew up playing racing games, and I think because of that it became very hard for me to connect with people when they were talking about indie games. Which is why it was special when there was an indie game coming out that was specifically about street racing. Because I feel like now I understand that this game is basically appreciating everything that came before, and it is a love letter to all of the racing games that I grew up playing, and I'm now starting to understand what other people see in indie games. But before we get into this game, I do think it's important that we talk about the games that came before this, to explain why this game is special. I think Midnight Club 3 is one of the significant games that I need to talk about, mostly because I grew up playing it, and I feel like it is one of the main games that contributed to my experience with these street racing kind of games. And I think another major reason why is because I think Night Runners took a significant amount of inspiration from Midnight Club 3. Midnight Club 3 was a really fun game. I think right from the footage that you're seeing, you'd probably understand that this is an insanely fun game to play. Midnight Club 3 was also probably one of the definitive games in general from this era when it comes to racing games, and to this day many people really love Midnight Club 3. What I think was significant about Midnight Club 3 was that it's called Dub Edition. It was because Dub, which was a popular magazine at the time for car culture, they had collaborated with Rockstar San Diego to make this game, and they predicted the trends that would happen later down the line, and they were right about a lot of them, and that's why this game was extremely good for anyone who was into cars, because it was a very close approximation of the actual car culture at the time. What you need to understand is that car culture is not just about racing itself, but is also an extensive culture which has other elements to it. A lot of these are apparent when you watch movies like the earlier Fast and Furious movies, where you will see people hanging out in these meetups, and then you'll see people showing off their cars, and the cars are insanely customized, which is why Midnight Club 3 also prominently had a lot of customization. I'm pretty sure it's actually one of the best for its times. Some direct influences from Midnight Club 3 that I can see in Night Runners is the way the mirror works. In Midnight Club 3, obviously due to the time, they couldn't do much with the mirrors, so they only show the headlights. Mirrors are one of the most interesting problems in racing games because they have to render quite a lot to show the mirrors, and usually that's not exactly feasible. And it's an interesting solution proposed by Midnight Club 3, and it's interesting that more games don't do this, and Night Runners did, so it quite stood out to me. Another thing was mentioned right in the patch notes, which to being directly taken from Midnight Club, which is the lines that come from the bars when you are in their slipstream, which is a nice touch. Also, side note, I just realized not everyone would know what a slipstream is, but that's basically when you're going behind another car and it's sort of creating a air pocket, and it sort of lets you go faster because you're following them. So the way these two games show it is basically by showing those lines coming out of the opponent's car. In a similar way, I also need to talk about the Underground series, which is Need for Speed Underground 1 and Need for Speed Underground 2, which I also believe would be major inspirations for this game. And these games have similar elements when it comes to the culture. You can see people at the races, you can customize your car to all hell and make them look completely terrible, and things like these are essential to make a good street racing game. There's also other games that I don't talk about, like Tokyo Extreme Racer 3, which I believe is actually a more one-to-one inspiration for this, because it is so closely related to the kind of game that Night Runners is, especially with the highway racing in Japan. And I'm pretty sure there's other games that I'm not aware about that have also contributed to this. Lastly, there's other media, like earlier I mentioned Fast and Furious, the first 3 movies especially, which also are very similar to this car culture kind of vibe, except they're very exaggerated. But I think for people who didn't actually get into street racing, these movies did set a lot of the vibe for what the car culture scene was. And there's also other media like Initial D, which I think is one of the significant ones, because I think Initial D comes really close to the actual low-key sort of vibe that goes on with the street racing scene, especially in Japan. There's also Wangan Midnight, and that is similar to Initial D, except it's about highway racing, which is why it's also a lot closer to Night Runners. And of course, finally, the main thing that I want to mention is a lot of the VHS footage which was taken by the real people that used to street race, and it is actually one of the best documentations that you can get of these. In the game, there's like this parking lot sort of area where you go to have races and stuff, and I think this is where one of the main influences from these VHS tapes comes about. Because you'll see that a lot of the license plates and the faces are blurred. And this is not too dissimilar from how a lot of the VHS footage that I talked about, they also have a lot of the things that are blurred, because obviously this is illegal and they don't want to have anything identifying on them. This works for the faces because now the creator of the game doesn't have to make faces, but it also feels so much more immersive. And if you are interested in car culture and you haven't already watched these, I would highly recommend you go watch some of these. Night Runners is a fairly simple game. You have 2 main objectives. One is to grow your crew's reputation and to make more money. You start your night at 8 PM, and from here on out you'll be in the garage, from where you can see your car upgraded, buy a new car, anything that you want to do. You also need to change the oil on your car and stuff like that. But the main thing obviously is when you go outside with your car. You can either go around the city and just drive around, and the other option is if you want to race. To race, you need to enter the parking areas. The only one available in this prologue version of the game is Tatsumi, so let's head there. When you make your way to the parking area, you will get a very basic summary of what has been going on. One of the core aspects of this game is taking over an area, and the parking area should be yours, because this game is all about territory control, which is also an important aspect of street racing back in the day. If you've seen anything like Fast and Furious or something like that, you would know that reputation does matter a lot in street racing. In this area there will be many cars, and you can go up to a car and you can challenge the racer by calling them. And they will give you a sort of dialogue at the beginning, which depends on your car, your reputation, all those things. So they'll either trash talk you, well, they will obviously trash talk you, but the level of trash talk depends on your reputation, your car, and things like that. And they will give you a wager, and you can either accept or decline this wager. Now obviously if you decline it, you will not get into the race, you will lose a little bit of reputation, because it's kind of like you saw the wager, you realize you're not up for it, and you just gave up. If you accept it, you will get some reputation and you will get into the race itself. The game is just impressing me right away here, because the very first thing that you do is this extremely cool race start sequence, where you don't have a typical countdown. Instead you have a person there that is actually going to signal when you have to start, and you actually signal to them first that you're ready for the race by flashing your headlights, and then once the torch goes off, that's when you start. This is amazing. It is such a cool way, because you can't predict when you have to start the race. You actually just have to watch out for the light to go off, and you can start too early, which will lose you some repetition and will restart the race start sequence. And right off the bat, I need to talk about the driving, because this is amazing. This game has some of the best sense of speed that I've seen in a game, which is extremely important. Because these people used to drive extremely fast, ridiculously fast on these roads, and it was all in public roads, and it was terrifying really, and I'm kind of glad that this sort of stuff has died down a lot, because this is extremely dangerous. But this game is so good at emulating how dangerous that experience is and how fast you're going. The field of view changes, and there's also a blur effect that is applied to the things that are immediately near you, so you're completely focused right on the center of the screen on the road itself. When you're passing a vehicle next to you, your controller also vibrates a little bit, which is just a really nice touch. One of my favorite parts about this is the way the music works with this. The music is dynamic and reacts to how you're driving. So when you float the pedal down and you're going really fast, that's when the music starts blaring with all of its frequencies being audible. But the slower you're going, you're going to hear less and less of the low frequencies, and that sort of cutoff just makes it so much more interesting to listen to it. And when your car crashes, the music just cuts off entirely, and then when you start accelerating again, the music starts slowly coming back in. And you gotta remember that this footage that you're seeing is from one of the earlier races in the game. This car is probably entirely stock right now. This is one of the slower cars in the game. Later in this video I will have a better car and you'll see just how much better that feels. But even at this level, the cars feel amazingly fast, and I love that. Because a lot of games fail at making slower speeds look better, but this game managed to nail that aspect perfectly. Here's the footage I found on YouTube of one of the many VHS footage tapes that you can find that was taken by the very people who used to street race back in the day. And it's really interesting to watch these because you can see just how it used to feel for them. And I feel like this clip where he's going extremely fast, this is terrifying by the way, is so similar to how it actually feels to play in this game, and that is just amazing. Like the way it manages to capture that exact same VHS footage, like I'm pretty sure this was actually an inspiration for the game itself. Also, this song is genuinely such a banger. Like I cannot tell you, when I was editing this video, I was going through this footage, I keep getting lost just watching it because this song is just so addicting. I love this song. Every time this comes in the game, I'm completely locked in. The entire soundtrack for this game is just beautiful. And even though it gets repetitive after you play this game for like 10 hours, I really like it and I really hope that more songs get added to it soon enough. At the end of each race, you will have this cool flyby sequence where you will be staring at each other's face. Whether you lose or win, the same sequence will play and it will show you what you've earned or lost. You will either get the cash money, you'll earn some rep, you'll gain a multiplier, which I'll get to in a bit, and if you lose, then you're just gonna have the same sequence playing, except you'll be losing everything. A lot of the times at the end of the race, you're gonna get a text like this. My hand grip was on the whole time, this don't count. And this was so funny that I actually had to turn on my mic just to react to this. So here's a live reaction from me. Dude, oh my god, are you seeing that? No way. Now as you can see in this race at the top left, it says signal lost, which basically happens when you're so far away from the other car, so like you've probably just gotten so far ahead that the other car is not even in range of you. However, in this case, he has finished because he was so far ahead of me that he's no longer in range of me. And this is an important part of the game. You can't restart without incurring losses to your money, which means sometimes you'll have to lose. But losing is not just putting your wager at risk, because yes, you will lose the money that you bet, but there's also reputation that you're gonna lose, and that's not even the worst part. At each night, you start with a multiplier of 0. When you win a race, this multiplier goes up, and once it crosses 1, however much multiplier you have is going to be added to your winnings from the betting cash for each race. So that means you first of all have to get this number above 1 in one single night, and when you lose a race, this multiplier goes down. But you can imagine just how much earnings you can have just by getting this multiplier up. So it is extremely important to maintain that multiplier, and losing a race completely ruins all of that. I don't think anyone noticed. And there you go. Ashley made some money from that race. To explain what happened here, the race had a wager of around 800,000 yen, which is a good amount. However, before I started the race, I got a call from Sakura. I have a large side bet against you. Sakura will give me 1,200,000 yen to lose this race, which, if you can do math, is actually a little bit more than the bet that I have. However, I also have a multiplier of 1.33, which means I'm actually going to get more than the initial bet that I have. So even if Sakura gives me the money, it's actually not going to be that much more than what I'm actually going to win. And if the multiplier was higher, I was going to win even more. By doing this, the game gives you a chance. More of a short-term, long-term game. It really does add an interesting layer because it's also the reputation. One of the things that really matters in the street racing scene is your reputation, your pride as a racer. This is one of the things that happens a lot in street racing movies. But losing a race is kind of a stack to your chest. And I think in this race, I did not actually intend to lose. I was just driving so horribly that I ended up losing the race anyway, which is extremely embarrassing because I was playing like ass for this one. And losing a race because you just couldn't be good enough, it hurts. Because again, you can't restart a race. This thing has such a high risk, high reward sort of gameplay loop that you don't have a second chance. If you lose, you lose. You have to put your mind into the game or you're going to have long-term losses. The last race for the day was actually against Sakura himself. And in this one, we have a wager of 600,000, which is actually quite less. But as you can see here, I was falling behind by the end. But also, I'm not that far behind. I'm actually quite close. And if I tried, I could actually get, like, I could barely just, I can feel it, I can do it. If I just tried a little bit harder, I could do it. And yet I failed. This, honestly, kind of sucks more. Because you know you had a chance. You could do it. You were that close. You could almost reach it. And yet you failed. And that hurts. That hurts like hell. Because you know that it was your fault. And I know, this fucking sucks. I hate it when this happens. This is the most awful feeling ever. You want a rerun? I like my odds. Sakura is asking us for a double nothing rematch, which means we get a chance to redeem ourselves. And after that spectacular loss from last time, I do think I have a chance at winning if I tried hard enough. But here's where things got interesting. So if I lose this race, I am going to get cleared of all of my debt. If you can see at the top, I have a debt, which means basically I had borrowed money from this gang for the sake of betting it. And this is something that the game does by default when you start the game. So, as you can remember, this was a loss that was very personal to me. So when I lost this race, it kind of hurt because I didn't want to lose so spectacularly. And I thought this was a chance to redeem myself. But also, a debt clearance of that much money, because remember what happens here is that at the end of each race, the debt money is going to get reduced from your winnings, so you're not actually getting the whole winnings of each race. If you clear off the debt, you're going to earn so much more from each race. However, to clear the debt, I will have to lose this race, which is kind of ass, because I feel like I can actually win this, and as you can see, I'm actually winning. I am in the lead. I have a chance at winning this. So what's at stake here really is my pride, and I think that's amazing. because in this moment I had that conflict. I was starting to understand that I could lose this race intentionally, and this is something that happens all the time in sports, losing intentionally for another sort of game. This is not like the previous one where you're going to get some money. This is when you're in charge that gets cleared. And remember that this is the last race of the day, so the multiplier doesn't even matter right now. Like, I could lose this race, it doesn't matter. This is only about one thing. It's about my pride, my reputation. I can see him in the rear view, I can see how close he is, but he's also still in my rear view. I have a chance. I'm winning this, I'm driving so well, everything is going well. But if I lose, my debt gets cleared. I made a choice. I was driving really well, there was no way I could have lost that, and that was my redemption. But at least in my heart, I knew I could have won. But for everyone else, I lost, and I lost my money and my reputation from that race. That kind of hurts. But on the plus side, I have cleared my debt. Now that I had cleared my debt, the next day I had quite a lot of cash to use for myself. What this meant was that I can get to one of the most interesting parts about the game, which is the customization. And this game's customization is brilliant. Like, you can customize just so much about your car that, like, I think you should just go see this for yourself. Especially if you're someone that actually likes cars, you'll realize just how many options you have. Like, it is insane just how much this game lets you customize. And this is one of the main things that you're working towards. When you get the money, you want to spend it on your car so you can get the coolest looking car. Well, of course, also the fastest looking car, but looking cool is more important than going fast. Especially when you're talking about early zeros car culture. Ricing your car out to look ugly is one of the most important things that you need to be worried about. Now that I had all this money, I spent it all on my car. And when I say I spent it all on my car, I spent it all on my car. I had barely anything left on me. And if you remember, for every race, you have to set a wager, which I forgot about. Thankfully, at the beginning of the night, the guys from the Yakuza are very chill guys, by the way, love them. They called me up and they offered to give me another loan. Since I had not considered the fact that I needed the money, I turned them down. Thankfully, when I got to the parking area, there was this dumb bitch over here who actually managed to give me a bet that was gonna give me more money. Good enough, I just have to win this race. And as you can see at the beginning of this race, this is easy. I can do this very easily. I lost the race. I lost all the money from the race. And here I am. There's no way I could actually bet anything because no one is ever going to accept your bet of anything below this much money. It was over for me. So I had to restart the night. I had to go for a next night. And there I had to accept the debt, and thankfully we were back in business. That's why the debt system is kind of amazing, because yes, it takes away from you at the end of each race, but sometimes you do need that money, because sometimes you're going to burn through the money and you're going to need more money. It sort of acts as a fail-safe, which is amazing. I really like this system. And so the night went on, and I won a lot of races, and I kept winning, and I kept getting so much more money. My multiplier kept going up, my rep kept going up. It felt nicer and nicer to win, and I was starting to feel like I'm getting a hang of this game. And I spent the next few days upgrading my car, and by the end of it, I had a properly riced car, and all of my issues slowly fading away as my car was looking better and better and better. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the customization because, as you can see, this car is a lot better than what it used to look like before. However, there is actually a lot of things that you have to do. You need to consider the fact that the physical things that you put on your car are also going to affect the performance of your car. Like having carbon fiber, which is a substance that is much lighter than the normal things that you put on a car for the hood, for the door and all those things, are going to make your car lighter and a lot easier to drive. but they also look quite terrible when you put them all over the car. So it becomes one of those things where you really do need to think a lot more than just upgrading your car to the max. You need to strike a balance. You need to think about how to make your car look good. You also need to think about what things you want to upgrade and where you want to invest your money. And initially I had a lot of problems with the handling in this game, but I think over time when I realized what kind of things I actually need to be upgrading, I started to get a better handle of how to make my car handle better as well as go faster. And at the end of this, I had a car that was so much faster than anything I could have imagined at the beginning of the game. Another thing you might notice is that to buy new parts, you have to go to the store kind of place, and this is one of my favorite things about the game, how much it tries to make things immersive and feel a lot like the original thing that was going on. And really it's touches like these that make this feel like the perfect street racing game for me, because it is so much in touch with the culture and it is so determined to put you into the shoes of what it would have been like, to give you that vibe, to take you back to those times, not just as a racer but also as a gamer. And this is something that I just appreciate so much about this game. And I think this could not have come from a AAA studio. This has to be something that comes from the passion of an indie game developer. This is something that I would have made as a kid. And now to close off, I want to show one of the final races that I had in this game with what is possibly the fastest that I can make this car go. And I think this is probably the peak of what this game's demo has to offer for you. Naturally, I could talk about the speed because the speed is amazing, and you'll see that, but I think one of the more important things that became really apparent to me at this point of the game was that having the faster car is not always what determines victory. And this is something that's prevalent throughout the game, but especially now that you feel like, yes, I have the fastest car, I can do anything. Now the only problem is your skill. And you'll notice that one of the main problems is always overtaking on these roads. Because yes, you might be able to keep up with your opponent, but you will not be able to overtake them. That is always going to be a hard task to do. However, I will also have to touch on the fact that the rubber banding in this game is insane. Like, if you fall behind someone, it is going to be pretty easy to catch up, especially if you fall behind earlier on. They will go so slow, you'll be easily able to catch up and leave them in the dust. Which is one of the issues that I have with this game, but I'm hoping the AI gets fixed by the time the actual game comes out. There's certainly a lot of things I didn't say in this video. There's a lot of things I missed out on because there is a lot to this game, but I don't want to bore you all with what this game is about. But I think I managed to capture the essence of what makes this game special and what makes it so much fun to play. If you're not into racing games, I definitely think you should give it a shot because while it's not the best game for a beginner, I would say it does capture the essence very fucking well. Although again, this is only the demo, the prologue of the game, and it's not the full game, but it's already pretty good, and I am really excited to see where this game goes. And so before I wrap this up, I want to talk about the future potential of the game. And you'll notice that this game isn't quite finished when it comes to the map, because sometimes when you try to go out of bounds, you'll see this. Wait a minute. Haruna?
On Mount Akina, or Haruna as it's actually known.
Yeah, so apparently Haruna is going to be in the game. If you don't know what Haruna is, that is the mountain that Mount Akina, which is one of the most popular togeis right now because of initial D, is probably going to be in the game. And Haruna is not a highway, it's a toge. It's a very different kind of racing. Even the Tokyo Xtreme Racer 3 game, which I believe is one of the main inspirations for this game, didn't have togeis. They had a completely separate game called Tokyo Extreme Drift for that. And I can only imagine that this game is actually going to have a bit of the toge aspect, and that sounds exciting. I mean, this would be the perfect racing game if it had toge racing in it as well. And I can only imagine that there's probably potential for more things. Me personally, I would love to see parking lots. Like if you've seen Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, a parking lot like that one would actually just seal the whole deal. And there could even be potential for something like the multiplayer mode where you can actually go to a car meet, you can walk around, you can look at others' cars, and maybe you can have your own avatar, like a person, I don't know, but that's a bit too far. But again, there's definitely a lot of potential to go deeper into car culture and emulate the experience even better. But of course, that's just up to how much the dev can do, because again, this game is made by a single person, which is amazing, the fact that this is a solo dev project, but that's great. I'm really proud of him, because this is a very special game, and I can only hope that this actually becomes a perfect street racing game for everyone. My only complaints, of course, are the rubber banding, and a more minor complaint is the fact that I feel like we're at this point in time where cars have been tagged as something that is very male dominated, and I think there has been a sort of push it towards more broader audiences. So far this feels like a very weird thing to complain about, but so far I feel like this game was very much intended to be for a male audience, which feels a bit weird, because even Sakura, which I initially thought would probably be the first female opponent, is probably also just a guy. And even the way the characters talk to you, it feels like the protagonist is also supposedly a guy. I'm hoping that's not the case, because I think this could be a game that could get more people into racing games and cars in general, and I wish this game catered more towards audiences that aren't just men.
I played Need for Speed like 6 times. I feel like Fast and Furious was like the first girl driving a car, like badass. Obviously Letty, I was like, Letty's badass. I want to be a Letty.
I'm sure the dev is probably going to work on it. Other than that, I think this game is actually pretty good, and I feel like all of the lack of polish is probably going to be gone by the time the real game comes out. Because I even had issues with this game when I initially was working on this video, especially the navigation originally was really bad. Because in the map you couldn't actually see the player's car, and the GPS was a bit hidden away. And things like these made it a lot harder to navigate, but then an update dropped that fixed a lot of these issues. So again, I know that this game is going to evolve over time, so it feels a bit unfair to criticize it, because there are people who are way smarter than me who have already criticized this game a lot more than I could. This video is just supposed to be me appreciating what does work for the game. It isn't perfect and it has its flaws, as you can expect, because it's being made by a single person, but it has done so many things right, and I'm very much hopeful that this turns out well, and I honestly can't wait to make a video on the final game once it comes out. Before I end the video, I also want to give out some advice in case you do not know anything about car culture and racing games and the sort, and you kind of want to get into it. But I should mention, I am by no means an expert. I'm not even that deep into car culture and all these things, but from what I know, I would recommend some things. First of all, for racing games, I would highly recommend Racewick's, if that's how you pronounce it, Racewick's video on racing games. That's lovely.
That is to say, a better problem that arcade racers have. Basically, there aren't any.
Whitelight also has a really good video on racing, and they also have a few more videos on the topic, so you could probably check that as well. There's also a YouTuber called Ghoul City Online, who also makes some really fun videos on racing movies and anime. He has a previous channel called Ghoul City Offline, so there's 2 channels where you can find videos on either of them. Ghoul City Online is the current one, I guess. I don't know, it's confusing, but that's also a really good channel.
In 2001, the world changed forever. Obviously, we all know what a massively important year this was in world history. It's the year that the mashed potato machine was invented, but not only that, the first Fast and the Furious film was released in theaters.
I would also recommend channels like Gears and Gasoline and NoriRO, both of which are great for car culture stuff. There's YouTubers like KuruHS and Dustin Eden, and there was the rat guy, I forgot his name. There's quite a lot of stuff out there, and depending on what you like, you'll probably find something good. I would also recommend games like Need for Speed Underground 1, Need for Speed Underground 2, and Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition Remix, all 3 of which I've mentioned at the beginning. And my personal favorite is Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005, which is not too similar to this, but I do think it is a very fun game. There's also games that I haven't played, like Tokyo Xtreme Racer 3, Tokyo Xtreme Drift 2, either of which have this great video as well, which you can go watch if you want. And of course, you can always just go watch the first 3 Fast and Furious movies, because they're also quite a fun watch, or Initial D, which is also really good, if you're fine with the CGI and the fact that it's an anime. I'll drop all of these things in the comments or in the description, and I'll try to add more things that come up later on So if you're into car culture or you want to get into racing games, you'll probably find something down there. That's going to be the end of the video. I'm very much thankful if you've watched up to this point. I'm a computer science engineering college student, so I don't get a lot of time to work on these things, and this video especially took a lot of time and effort to make, and I'm really glad that it's finally over. But also at the same time, I think I got to spend so much more time with the things that I grew up with, especially that thing where I was using the camera to record the game footage for Midnight Club 3 and Need for Speed Underground. That was really fun to do. And I got to revisit the other things about car culture that I love so much, and I am really thankful for having done that. The last video did really well, as I joked about at the beginning, and I'm genuinely thankful for all of the support. Again, this video is not extremely connected to that one because I don't want my channel to fall under a specific niche, because then I'd be forced to make content specifically to that niche, and I don't think I'm quite obsessed with anything to that point. However, I want this to be more of a diary of my reflections on the things that I consume. I hope that is enough to captivate some people at the very least. If you have any feedback at all about what you liked, what you disliked, what you want me to keep doing, or any suggestions, I would love to hear that. I absolutely would. I also try to make this video a bit more long form because I quite dislike the editing where you're trying to capture the audience's attention. If that's boring, let me know, because I will try my best to balance it, but it's kind of hard to express yourself when you're trying to cut things down for retention. It's quite boring actually, but hey, I'll try to find a good compromise. Other than that, if you liked it, you can leave a like. If you want to watch more, you can subscribe, because I don't think there's quite enough videos on this channel for you to go look at the other stuff. Other than that, that's going to be it from me. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll take my leave. This is really awkward. Bye bye.